Hi, good morning. So today is February 16, 2026, and it is 12:44 p.m. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and this would be demo 111, so 111. I'm going to be recording this demo throughout the day in different segments. So I'm going to split it in chunks, okay? So this first chunk is interesting. So it is a continuation. I think it was demo 104 or 105 where I talked about. Oh, that is interesting. Um, yeah, so apparently they are in emergency state. Um, uh, I mean, I'm not gonna get into the details of how I know, but I know. Um, yeah, so in demo 104 or 105, I can't recall exactly the number. I talked about this metric that I created that's inspired on the Levenstein distance. So it's basically like an edit distance, okay? And the idea of that metric is to compute, how do you have to change the relationships in the familial group of the agents, because the agents are usually family members, right? So they're brothers, sisters, father, son, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, right? But you can change the relationships to obscure what's happening, right? So, for example, you can turn a sister-in-law into a sister, or you can turn a brother-in-law into a brother, right? Or you can turn a sister into a sister-in-law. So the opposite, right? And that way the target doesn't really know who's who, right? And you can confuse things. But the idea of this metric was to weight the edits. So how many things you have to change on the identity of an agent, weighting that, the weight, making it be how disruptive the change is to the life of the agent, right? To the real identity of the agent, right? So if you have to change the full legal name, that is a very disruptive change, because then that person has to be deep undercover, right? They cannot even talk to their parents or their family. So that's very disruptive. And the idea of doing that is that if I can then rank, the proposed changes that you would have to make to transition from one reality to an alternative reality. So what you're going to present to the target, right? By how disruptive all the changes are across all the agents. And then sort them by, from less disruptive to most disruptive. And then pick the top, right? So that's probably the best. So that would be the change that would produce the outcome that you want. So being able to trick the target in the way you want, right? With the least amount of disruption for all these people that you need to disrupt their lives in a way or another, right? So in that demo, I put forward a scenario that was computed by my system using this metric, which basically posed that that scenario was that my former partner, Gloria Espina, that could be her name, but that would be her married name, meaning that Andres, the husband, would be, the real husband, right? The real husband would be Andres Espina, right? And in that demo, I hypothesized that, I observed that if that was the case, and in the demo, I said that in the context of asking the informant, right? If that was the case. I'm sorry. I have a bit of a cough today. But so I asked that question, right? Whether that could be the situation. And I hypothesized that, if that was the case, what they did was to protect their identities, right? But just by just changing their relationships among them, and then they changed the identity of the child. Okay, that's what I left it at that point. But after that day, I've been doing more research on this. More data science, right? And I figured that I could take. By the way, I asked the informant, right, like, that opportunity, and on later days, I can't recall exactly which day it was, but he sent me confirmation that yes, that was a spot on, and he was actually like, he congratulated me. Like, I can't recall exactly the words that he used, but he was impressed. Like, he said something to the effect that it was impressive to him that I could figure out these complicated rules using software, right? I mean, to me, it's not surprising because, I know that with software, with these information retrieval techniques, you can, solve very complex problems like the ones Google solves every single time you do a query, right? Like this thing that I'm saying, I'm not, I didn't invent this, right? This is based on information retrieval principles. It's just, my tradecraft, right? So, but anyhow, I figured that I could go deeper on this and use the same technique recursively. Well, it's not exactly recursively, but iteratively in other dimensions. And I know it sounds complicated, but let me tell you what I mean, right? So, in that first pass, what I did was, okay, calculate what would be the scenario that would be the least disruptive, okay? And it was based on changing how you change the relationship of the agents, okay? But there is another way to do it, which is changing the names, okay? And within the possibility of changing the names, there is also a subtlety, okay? The subtlety is the following, that you can change the name of an agent by, there's multiple ways to do it. Like even within that option, if you say, well, I'm going to change the name, even within that path, there's multiple ways to do it. Like you don't have to go full on, right? Like you don't have to go all the way. One way to do it is, of course, changing the actual identity, like issuing new identity documents from a government, which they can do because they control the governments of multiple countries, right? So they have control over the issuance of passports, driver's license, and they can do it definitely, right? That's not a problem, but it's still disruptive because then this person has to go by a completely different name. And also, and this part is not software, but it's just deduction, right? Another problem they have to solve as they do this is that they need to be able to roll. They have two problems that they have to solve, right? When they're doing this. One is, and I think it's the most important, is plausible deniability. And I say most important because it's most important not to the agents, but to the network, right? So if they get caught, they need to be able to explain it as, oh, this was just a huge misunderstanding, right? Like this was a mistake, like we didn't tell you this, but there was a piece of information. I mean, it's like, to the target, right? So if the target goes and talks to the FBI, they will say, oh, no, it's that you misunderstood the situation, right? But they need to be able to explain it, right? I mean, there has to be an alternative explanation that is not, we are all spies for Diosdado Cabello, right? So that's problem number one. And that's important because that protects Diosdado Cabello, not because it protects them, because it protects Diosdado, right? And the Venezuelan intelligence and the Chinese intelligence, etc. So that is important. But the second thing that is important for them is that they need to be able to roll it back. Meaning, in the case of, think of the case of my former partner, okay? Without getting into details of what was her name, like before the operation started, but, she had a name and they had to change it. And she had a husband, and she still has that husband, right? But they need to be able to roll it back. What I mean is when they recruited her, they didn't know if the operation was going to last a week, or if it was going to last a month, or a year, or 10 years, or if it was going to get to the Supreme Court of the United States, as it is, right? So that's an information that they don't have because the operation hasn't unfolded, right? But so in the case it doesn't work out, like for example, say that I don't know, she and we had a fight for some reason, and on the first week of the quote unquote dating relationship, and I said I don't want to see you anymore, right? And the relationship only lasted 1 week. So in that case, they need to be able to roll it back, meaning she will want to be able to still be married to the husband, right? She don't want to be divorced, right? She wouldn't want to be divorced and have to get remarried, is what I'm trying to say. Or she wouldn't want to have to change the name of the child back to what it was, or whatever, right? And if there are multiple failed operations, right? So if an agent, they don't, imagine, right? They don't want to burn the agents if the operation doesn't work. Meaning, if, this relationship lasted for, 5 days, they will want to be able to reuse the agent, to re-engage that agent in a different operation later, right? Maybe not immediately, but later. So, and if that's the case and that operation also doesn't work, then this agent will have to change the name again, you see? So this is a problem because then, if they change the name of an agent multiple times, it could lead to detection, to flagging by the FBI, whatever, right? So, they need to be able to roll it back with a minimal amount of paperwork, right? Of traceable documents. So you see, it's a lot of conditions that they have to meet. So that got me thinking, right? Okay, so maybe I can apply the same information retrieval principle that I was describing before, but measuring the edit distance of changing the identity, because as I said, there's multiple ways to do it, right? So the largest edit distance would be if you have to go all the way and change the driver's license, the passport, the birth certificate, right? That's a change that is super hard to roll back. It's very disruptive as a change, not only to the life of the agent, but as a change. It's disruptive because if you want to roll it back, you have to roll back all these hard documents that now physically exist and are also recorded in governmental computing systems, right? So that is a more disruptive change. But the same idea, right? So if you know, so I expanded the system to not only look at how disruptive the changes are and compute the distance that way, but also to measure, to the life of the agents, right? But how disruptive the changes are in terms of how difficult they are to roll back, and also compute the distance for that, right? So that's what I did. And the same principle, right? So I add up or queue all the changes that you have to make to change the identity of an agent, right? In this way, meaning say that you want to change the full name. Well, you have to change the driver's license, you have to change the birth certificate, you have to change the passport, you have to change the college degree, and add the score of disruptiveness or permanence of these record changes, add them up, right? And that would be the score of that change of identity for that agent, right? And then the same, add across all the scenarios and aggregate by a scenario and also aggregate by agent to understand which is the scenario with the highest or lower score and which is the agent with the higher or lower score of disruption in this way, right? So you can see who they disrupted the most and which is or the least, and which is the scenario that is most disruptive or the least disruptive, right? This guy is following me one second. Okay, so that's the idea, right? So I did exactly that, right? And I've been running scenarios for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. And something interesting came up, right? So there is a scenario that seems to win on both techniques. So it's the least disruptive for the agents, and it's also the least disruptive in terms of the permanence of these records. So, like this seems like the winner overall, right? Like it's hard to win on 2 techniques at the same time. Like if you're applying 2 ranking techniques, I don't know how to express it in words, but if you're applying 2 different techniques and on the 2 techniques a single scenario wins, that is a pretty strong signal, right? That this is probably the way it works. And given that I already have confirmation from the informant, right, and that even almost congratulated me, right, on the accomplishment. It seems pretty obvious to me that this is probably the way it works, right? But again, like I'm phrasing this more than a guess. More than that, it's really a question, right? Because the informant didn't give me the details. He just gave me confirmation that I'm on the right track. But if you can tell me if this is exactly the name of Andres, right? What I'm looking for is the name of Andres. I already have the photo because I got confirmation. I think it was yesterday from her that that's the photo, right? Not the photos that she has shown me before, but yesterday I showed her a photo that I found in one of my pen drives, and she said that's Salvador, who is Andres really, right? So she confirmed that that's him, right? So now I have a photo of him, and it's none of the photos that she has shown me before, by the way. But anyhow, this is interesting. So they're parking the cars in this high school. It's amazing. So this is another Uber kind of dispatching center, right? So today is a federal holiday, right? So this school is closed, and they have, I don't know. I can count them. I'll count them with software, but they have probably close to 100 vehicles in here, and there's nobody playing in the field. So where all these? The school is closed, and you have all these cars that, I'm sure they will be flagged. Yes, this one got flagged. Yeah, yeah. Oh, this got super flagged. This is Lima Whiskey Frank 7000. That's an important car. So see, they're parking the cars in the high schools during the non-school days. Well, and I imagine during the school days as well, right? Anyhow, yeah, and actually, I did have a metric for this, like, I don't know, like a year ago, right? This is how I started catching them on the like the cars, right? When they had them parked in ensemble like this, even before having the U index. And the technique is by looking at the. I mean, I'm just telling you this right now because if I will forget, but it's a good metric. It's a very good metric. It's by looking at the average price of the resale price of these cars that you find in the high school parking lots according to the Kelly Blue Book. And these they get flagged because students, I mean, during the school days, they make it look like these are the cars of the students. But the cars, I mean, the price value of the cars in the high school are disproportionately high to the, how do I express this? I mean, I have a mathematical formula that I use to model this, but, if you take the average income in this area, by in this zip code, right? You will see that compared to other areas in the country, it's not that high, right? I don't know. It's like per household, it's like, I don't know, 90,000, right? Something, I can't recall the exact number. But so you have an average household income of $90,000, and the average price of these vehicles in the high schools is close to $50,000 because they're all like super high end trucks and Cherokees and Jeeps and like vehicles that are more on the expensive side, right? And new, like the models are newer models. So I don't know, it's more of a cultural thing, but if you think of a regular household, of a working family, the people that would have the most expensive car in the household generally is not the kid, right? Generally it's the parents. So I mean, if these are the cars of the kids, what cars are the parents driving? Porsches and Mercedes and for a $90,000 a year household income, right? It just doesn't add up. So they get, I mean, the schools themselves, I used to flag them in the early days using this technique even before having the data. But after I got the data, of course, I saw that the schools are an operational hub, really. Anyhow, but going back to the conversation that we were having, they have another pile of vehicles on this other side of the same high school. But okay, back to the conversation, right? Yes. So this I'm phrasing more as a question to the informant to tell me if this is the name, right, of Andres, because I'm looking for the name because that's something that he cannot change, and he's probably in a way trapped within the country, right? If he tries to leave, there's gonna be a record with the real name or the fingerprints. Like there's a lot of ways that he can be caught, right? So, and of course, because I want to get my son back and I want justice, I'm trying to facilitate that he gets caught. That's my motivation here. Because what he's done are crimes, right? And it's not vengeance, it's just, justice. But anyhow, yes. So this scenario that wins on the two techniques, on the two scoring techniques, is super interesting, right? And I have to really sit down and think about how to structure this in a structured manner, right? So I can convey it better. But I'm gonna give you the gist of it, right? So the idea is there's a subtlety, a cultural subtlety in Hispanic culture, in the Hispanic ethnicities. So people like me that are Hispanics, and in this case at least, most of the agents are Hispanics, right? Because that's why they brought me here, right? Because it's my own ethnicity, so it's easier, right, to do what they do. So we have a particularity is that we have usually two names, first name and middle name, and we also have a last name, two last names, right? Like for example, in my case, my full name. If I give you my full name, it is Reynaldo Javier Aguiar Marcano, right? So you see, if I told you that my name is Javier Marcano, you would think I'm a completely different person. So this is interesting because it gives me 4 possibilities, basically. I can tell you that my name is Javier Marcano. I could tell you that my name is Javier Aguiar. I could tell you that my name is Reinaldo Aguiar, or I could tell you that my name is Reinaldo Marcano, right? And technically, whatever of the 4 things that I tell you, or actually 5, I could tell you that my name is Reinaldo Javier Aguiar Marcano. Or I could even tell you that my name is Javier Reinaldo Aguiar Marcano. And technically, I wouldn't be lying. Like, if I told you any of those things, so see, I can construct like 6 or 8 different names with the real components of my name, of my legal name, right? And technically, I wouldn't be lying to you, right? Like, Javier is in my name and Marcano is in my name as well, right? And many people make the mistake, like even on official offices, they will call me things like Rinaldo Marcano, right? Because they look at the driver's license and they see the 2 last names and they read the last thing that they see, right? So Marcano. So they will call me Rinaldo Marcano, right? And that's technically correct. It's not incorrect, right? But I always correct them and say, it's Aguiar. But anyhow, so these can be exploited, right? And I've seen them exploiting this in the registration of the houses. Like, they do this a lot, right? But in this particular context of obscuring the identities of the social circle, of the familial group, of the agents that are tricking the target, it's very useful, right? And the technique would be, so for example, in a case like this, right, where you have 2 agents that are married and you want to inject the female agent as the romantic partner of the target, what you can do is that you can give, because imagine that they have a child, right? And that child has the real first last name of the male agent, because that's also in our culture, right? Like, when you have a child, and I don't know if this applies to all cultures, or to all legal systems, but when you have a child, the child has the last name of the father, right? And in our culture, the second last name comes from the mother. So the Marcano in my last name, my last name is Aguiar Marcano, right? I have 2 components on it, and the Marcano comes from my mom, right? But the Aguiar comes from my father. So it's an easy way to know, who is your maternal familial group and who is your paternal familiar, who are in your paternal familiar group. Well, this is interesting. Okay. So if I told you, right, that I could give you, well, this place is important. It has a 3 flags marker, and it's a gated community. It's important. I'll check it out in the index later. Okay. So yes. So you see, it's a very useful tool, right, to create this deception. So what you can do, right, if you have this situation where you have a couple with a child that are agents, and the child naturally, you don't know when you're going to need that couple, right? I'm talking as if you are Diosdado Cabello, right? So you don't need when you're going to need to engage them. So, they may have a child with the name that the male agent, the last name that the male agent has, right? And you cannot change that because the child is already born, right? So what you can do is, it's easy, really. The scenario that wins, it's so simple, but it's very powerful, right? Once you see it, you say, okay, this is probably how they do it. So what you can do is, because you cannot change because in the previous demo, in 104 or 105, I said, well, the person that was most damaged in these rules was Sebastian, because they really changed his name for a decade. But maybe that is not true. And according to this scenario that the system computed in this way, it is not true, right? How do you do it? It's simple. Well, because the child is already born and you don't want to change the name of the child because you could get caught, really. What you can do is change the married name, the name on the marriage, right? So let's put a concrete example. Imagine that Andres is really called Andres Salvador Mendez Espina, okay? And he was married to, in 2002 or 2005, I don't know what year, he got married to Zuleima Molero Villas. Okay, so they get married, right? So if they assume that they got married in 2005 in Venezuela, her name, her married name would really be Zuleima Mendez, Zuleima de Mendez. In our culture, we put the de when people get married, right? So if people get married, if you're a woman and you get married and you want to adopt the name of your new husband, it would be called de, right? So in her case, it would be Zuleima de Zuleima de Mendez, right? And when the child is born, Sebastian, he would be named Sebastian Mendez, right? Because that is the first last name of the father, right? Whether it's real or not, but that was the name that he was at that point. But remember, he has another last name, which is Espina, right? So what you do is that you change the married last name, right, of the agent. So you change the married name from Zuleima Mendez to Zuleima Espina. So adopting the second last name of the male agent, right? So that way she becomes, and you change the first name. The first name is easy to change, right? I mean, it's easy to change in the following sense that they can still roll it back, because if they want to, if the operation doesn't work, and they want to say, no, I'm married to him. So if she wants to say, I'm married to Andres, she can explain it in the DMV by, oh, no, when I got the license the last time, they made a mistake and they put as my last name the second last name of Andres, but in reality it's Mendez, right? So this is a change that they can do in a day. They can administratively go to the DMV and get this, corrected, quote unquote, right? It doesn't require a legal change of name. They can explain it because in his driver's license, it appears Mendez Espina, right? And they will check his driver's license and they will say, oh, you're right. And then they will roll it back, right? But in this way, now Zuleima has the last name Espina, right? Which is a completely different name that doesn't appear in anywhere else, right? Like her real name is, remember, Zuleima Molero Villamizar, right? But now, out of the sudden, she has the last name Espina, which is neither of her two last names, right? So this accomplishes the goal. She got a completely different last name, and a last name that is not visible on the agent's identity, because the agent is really called Andres Mendez. Now, to pull this off, the only thing you have to do is to lie to the child. You have to tell him that his dad is called Salvador Mendez, when in reality the father is called Andres Mendez. I mean, he's called Andres Salvador Mendez, right? But everybody knows him really as Andres in his family, right? But they are telling the child that it's Salvador, which is also true because that name is also in his driver's license, but it's his middle name. It's not the first name, right? And they create the sham divorce with William Kyle Adams and the Adams law firm, divorcing Gloria Espina, this new created identity using this technique that I'm describing, from Salvador Mendez. So they're divorcing a person that has, they're divorcing her from, the identity, because that person doesn't really exist. She wasn't born Espina, right? That's not her name. But they're divorcing that identity from a person called Salvador Mendez, which is not really the name. The real name is, the name which they were legally married was really Andres Mendez, right? And according to this scenario, right? What I'm describing is a scenario computed by software. It might be that this is not exactly how they did it, but this is what would create the least amount of disruption for all the people involved, including the child, even lower than I thought last time. And it would be the easiest to roll back, because all they will have to do is two things. One, go to the DMV and make this correction on the driver's license of her only, and then tell the child the truth, that, well, your father is not called Salvador Mendez, he's called Andres Salvador Mendez, right? Andres Salvador Mendez Espina. And yes, we are all part of the seven, right, of the Venezuelan intelligence. That's all they have to do. And it doesn't require lying to anybody else. And it also accomplishes the goal, because if I discover something and go to the to the FBI, right, and say Andres is lying about his name, he will say no. Here's my driver's license, and the name Salvador and Mendez are in my driver's license, right? Uh, I mean, technically and legally speaking, he's not really lying, right? Like he's giving names that are correct. Um, of course, this is an abuse of the of the I guess, right, the laws that regulate the issuances of driver's license, because, well, if he's going to go by Andres Mendez, he should put that in his driver's license, like not, you know, not use the middle name and the middle name and the first last name as if it was his full name, his full legal name, right? But this produces the least amount of disruption. So you see, and then the other thing you have to do is bring Jenny Espina, right? Who probably is really Jenny Mendez Espina, right? But you call her Jenny Espina, and then it looks like she's the sister of Gloria, but she's not the sister of Gloria. She might be the sister of Salvador or somebody else, right? But it looks like she's the sister of and also she's not really lying, because she has Jenny and she has Espina in the driver's license. And she can roll this back, even if they change the driver's license, she can roll it back at the DMV. It doesn't require a judge to sign off on a change of name, right, of legal name. Now, the one that is lying the most, I think, is Nelio Espina, right? Because he really, well, Nelio, of course, and Gloria Espina, right? Because they are assuming that last name Espina that is nowhere in their name, right? I imagine. So that this is interesting because it creates a lot of liability, because she registered. When she was asked at the clinic about her name to issue the birth certificate of the child, she might have lied, right? And that means that she might legally not be the mother of the child. Like she put a name that is not her real name, because that's also not the name that she was married under, right? Like she was married under Mendez, right? Probably, right? According to this scenario. I'm just talking about what would happen in this scenario, right? Hypothetically, just to analyze the consequences of it, right? So I don't know. It has a lot of interesting implications. Now, there's an interesting thing that I want to tell you that I think could be evidence of state sponsorship of this operation. Okay, there is one change that they had to do to make this happen, which is related to the person that they presented to me as the mother of Gloria Espina. Right? Her name supposedly is Norma Narines. Narines with the N, with the accented character, the accented N that we have in Spanish. But this is I think this could be hard proof, right? Because once Gloria or Zulema sent me her Venezuelan ID card, like her citizenship ID card. I don't recall what thing we were doing. We were renewing a passport. I can't recall what it was. And she sent me a copy. And in the copy, it says Gloria Espina Narines. And again, as I mentioned before, we have the custom that we take the second last name being the last name that comes from your mother, okay? But you see, this means that the Venezuelan government issued for her a false or fake citizenship ID, because her mother is not Narines. Her mother is Villamizar, right? Like as in Zulema Villamizar. Who is married to Humberto Molero, right? So to make that lie go through, they had to use the entity that issues the ID cards in Venezuela, which is the ONIDEX. By the way, I reported the director of the ONIDEX of that time to the IRS months ago, right? Before even coming to this conclusion yesterday. So, So, but the interesting thing is that they had to put in that Venezuelan ID card the last name of the mother, right? Of Norma Narines, right? So in that ID card of her in Venezuela, and I have a copy of it, it says Gloria Espina Narines, right? To make it pass as if that woman is her mother, but it's not really her mother, right? Um, So that could be hard evidence, right? I mean, hard evidence that this is because who has the power to issue a fake Venezuelan ID card? Of course, the Venezuelan government, right? So this shows that it might be a state sponsored by the Venezuelan government. And you see, so I think, and also philosophically, I think it also shows that if they have to make a change, I mean, I guess this is more like the philosophy of their MO, right, behind their MO. If they have to go that route, right, they definitely have to make a change. They will try to make the change on their jurisdiction, right, where they control everything, right, where they have more control of the judges, of the enforcement, of the regulations, of the law, right. That way, they don't have to. It's less risky, right? So if they're gonna change an identity, they seem to prefer to change it in Venezuela than to change it in Texas, even though they have full control of the institutions in Texas, right? But if they get caught in Venezuela, there will be no consequences to anybody, right? I guess impunity is guaranteed. I guess that's the reason. Here, at least they see the risk that the FBI or somebody, could, the DOJ, I don't know, could investigate this to a point where there could be consequences for the people on the DMV, who could then in turn talk, right? So I think that's probably the reason. But that's interesting, right? So Norma Narines is also a weak link in this, because there is hard evidence that they changed an ID card of Gloria or Zuleima to reflect that last name to pull this off, right? To trick the target. So that makes it so that Norma Narines is a weak link, right? Because there's hard evidence against her. And I know her personally. She stayed at my home for months at a time, so I can tell you that maybe she probably, right, probably she could talk. So I don't know. It could be interesting, right, to explore that. Um, yes, but so to reiterate, in this scenario, basically Andres would be called, and this is a question I want to ask to the informant, right? If Andres' name is really Andres Salvador Mendez Espina, right? That would be the winning situation, right? In terms of intrusiveness, low intrusiveness, and low resistance of rollback or for rollback. And if that's the case, the real marriage would be a marriage between Zuleima Molero Villamizar and Andres Salvador Mendez Espina, right? Those would be the two real, how do you say that? The bride and the groom, right? Those would be the names. Right? And then, but by doing this trick of faking the marriage to make it look like so she basically adopted the second last name. The trick is to adopting the second last name, so that the woman adopts the second last name. If I want to regeneralize this into a rule, right, that could be repeated, it would be a TTP. The woman adopts the second last name of the husband as a married name, and makes that pass as her maiden name. And the child is made believe that his father's name is his middle name and his first last name. So the child doesn't have to change his last name. This minimizes everything. So I don't know, informant, please tell me if this is the case, because it would be, I mean, if I have to sue Andres in federal court, it's useful for me to have the full name, right? The service address is easy because I can just serve him on her address, right? I have her address and they're married, right? So I can legally serve him on her address, but I need the full name. That's why I'm so interested in looking for the full name. So I don't know if you can, throw me a bone on this one. I would really, really, really appreciate it. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Bye. Good morning. Today is February 17th, 2026, and it is 6 a.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and this is a continuation of demo D111, 111. So this demo I'm going to split it into different chunks that I'm going to be recording over, I think, different days, because it's I have a few, I have a lot of small things. And I'm recording these demos every time I go out to make it, for different reasons. Like, one is to make it more useful, because at the same time that I'm recording this thing, I'm also recording them, right? So they're forced to follow me. It's a harder task for them because they have to listen to what I'm saying. They have to follow me, right? But in Lake Point States, because they have my internet capture there, anything I say, they will listen to real time, right? So this is more challenging for them, and also gives me the opportunity to record them, right? And to understand also things about the areas where I'm driving. So it's like a more efficient use of the time, I guess, right? But because of that, then what it means is that I'm going to record these demos while I'm out of the house, right? So and because there are several small things, I may it may take me a few instances, a few trips to record them all. So that's the thing, right? So today I'm going to FedEx again to refile the petition for writ of mandamus, because it got rejected by the clerk of the Supreme Court of the United States on formatting rules, the number of staples and things like that, right? So what I did yesterday, I went to Staples or Office Max, I can't recall, that is on Westheimer, and I bought supplies to be able to reprint, because it's a lot of copies, right? It's 10 copies. And so it's a lot. I had run out of ink, and so I had to buy ink, paper, and supplies, basically, and a better stapler to be able to produce the booklets. So that's what I'm doing, right? So because this is interesting, right? I hadn't noticed that it was rejected. I mean, it's not a smoking gun. I mean, it's, they can always justify it, but it's interesting, right? So this is the sequence. When I don't know, like maybe a month ago, right? When I started printing the guides, like like what I call the red pages, and if you're not sure what that is, please look at the previous demos. You will see. They started sending the USPS mailman that, of course, they control, right, at specific times to kind of it's kind of soft harassment in a way, right? So they started doing things like, for example, they used him to bring mail that was on hold at the USPS facility. So that mail was on hold, but they brought him. So they made the mailman go pick up the mail, and my house was marked as vacant by them, right, by the network. So this mail was on hold, and they made him go fetch it from USPS and bring it to me at my home, right? To have a pretext to accomplish multiple things. To have a pretext of knock on the door while I was working with the internet, to basically come close to the antenna, right? Closer. Because he walks through the driveway with that pretext. And also to get my signature on that letter that the attorneys of the HOA, the attorneys of Phil Denning, basically, the ones that are working for Phil Denning or with Phil Denning. It's a group effort, right? So they sent me a letter in which it was addressed to my company, but it had marked me. They have marked me in the to box as registered agent of the company, and this is described before. It's a ruse to pierce the corporate veil and find me personally liable, right, for whatever the company did or didn't do, right? To then have a pretext to put me in jail for contempt of the void orders that they entered, and they're void because they never served the company. But anyhow, So they started doing that, right, with the mailman. When that happened, right, because the mailman already had come a few times to, knock on the door, right, and they were using that as a pretext. I mean, those letters, and also the books that I was printing, because as I was printing the guides, I was buying author copies and sending them to me to review them, right, and to be able to approve what they call the distribution. That's a long story, but. So he was knocking on the door every time I was connected to the internet, publishing one of these books, right? So I told him, listen, because he said that he wanted to deliver the book in my hand because it didn't fit in the mailbox, right? So I told him, listen, I'm giving you all this story, and it's a little bit important because of this. I told him, listen, when this happens, right, that you have a package for me that you need to hand deliver. Please leave it here at this door. So this house at Lake Point Estates has two front doors, basically. One that is closer to the kitchen, and one that is the main entrance, which I have a gate in there that has a lock that nobody can walk through, right? For security reasons, right? So they don't, start harassing me knocking on the main door. So I told him, right, when this happens, please leave this package in this side entrance, so the one that is closer to the kitchen. Leave it there. I'll pick it up. I have security. I will get an alert that you are here, and I will come pick it up. Like, no need to knock on the door, right? To kind of, remove the interaction with him. But this is what they did when the. So, and remember, I told him specifically that door, right? And after that, he consistently did it. Like, in multiple occasions, he left the package in that door, in the door that is closer to the window. So what they did is, when the clerk the clerk of the United States, right, of the United States Supreme Court, rejected the petition for writ of mandamus, which I'm going to refile today, because I'm not going, and if they reject it, I'll refile it as many times as it's necessary. I'm not going to give up for the rejections, right, as you can obviously see. I mean, if I was going to give up by that, I would have given up a year ago, right? So anyhow, or years ago, really. Yes. So what they did, the clerk rejected the petition on the 9th, but the package was mailed on the 10th, which, by the way, is consistent with that hypothesis I had and the meta confirmation that the informant gave me the day after, that somebody got in trouble last Monday at the Supreme Court, or somebody in the supply chain of the Supreme Court, right? It could have been related to this rejection, I imagine, right? So they didn't disappear the package, because it was returned with a letter saying that it had formatting issues, and they attached the guidelines, like the rules that I have to follow, right? And it's a lengthy document. But anyhow, regarding the mailman, this is what I did. The clerk rejected the petition, but this particular package, that mailman did not leave it where I told him to leave it, because I told him to leave it there because it's a place where every time I go out of the house, I walk through that door or near that door, and I will see if there is a package, right? But what he did, he left it on the other door, and he kind of hid it behind a bush. It was impossible. I saw it by luck, really. I was passing by the door, and I saw something that looked strange, and I looked closer, and it was a package hidden under a bush. So he basically made this package impossible for me to see, and of course, this rejected petition could have been there for weeks if I hadn't been lucky yesterday, the 16th of February, and saw it. So I saw it around noon, something like that, right? So, no, maybe 11 a.m. So after I saw it, I immediately went buy supplies, because I knew I was out of ink, right? I mean, almost out of ink. So I knew I didn't have enough ink to print, 10 copies of this document, because it's a lengthy document, right? So I went out and bought supplies. And then I came back to the house and, spent the entire afternoon reformatting the petition, making sure that, that it complies with every single possible rule. And reprinted it, right? So today I'm going to FedEx to hand deliver that to the FedEx. That is, I'm going to the one that is next to the airport, because that produces the least amount of physical hubs or transfers in the FedEx network of this package, and that means that it's less opportunities for them to intercept it, lose it, damage it, whatever, right? Oh, by the way, this is important. The mailman left the package next to the sprinkler, right? And the package got wet, and the copies and the instructions got practically destroyed. And I scanned them, and you can see in the scanned image that the letters look blurry. Is because the ink, basically, I don't know how to say that. The documents got destroyed, and the check also got, almost destroyed. The cashier's check that I used to pay for, because they also returned the check, also got destroyed, right? But it's interesting to me that he hid the package under the bush in the door that I told him never to leave it there, and next to the sprinkler, where obviously it would get wet multiple times, right? For as long as I didn't see the package. This thing didn't get more destroyed because I saw it after 2 days. I think the package arrived on the 13th, which was Friday, I believe, and I saw it yesterday, 16th, right, which was Monday. So it only got 3 days of, sprinkle treatment. But if it had been 3 weeks, this thing would have been unreadable, right? And I wouldn't even know why it was rejected. So of course it's not a smoking gun, because it could be that they sent a different mailman, right, to justify this. But it's, of all the packages, precisely this package, got this treatment. It's interesting, right? So anyhow, the next item I have, I'm going to continue with the line of reasoning that I had yesterday on the first part of this demo. And I have a question for informant, which is, the informant told me, so I'm just, this is for informant. You told me, I don't know, like 2 or 3 months ago, I can't recall, that there was a relationship between my former partner, whom I know as Gloria Espina, and Patricia Rojas, who I've known for 30 years. But you never told me what the relationship is. And with all these discoveries about, the marriage to, what's his name? Andrés Salvador Méndez Espina, right? I don't know. This made me wonder what is the relationship, right, between Patricia Rojas and Zuleima, or Gloria Espina, right? Are they cousins? Are they stepsisters? Like I don't know, right? I don't know what the relationship is. But it seems like there's conflicting information there, right? Now, I don't know what is the second last name of Patricia, to be honest. My mom should probably know, because, they were neighbors for, I don't know, 5-6 years. So, I don't know. I'll find out then the second last name of Patricia. She's Rojas Sanchez, I think. I believe she might be Rojas Sanchez, because the mother was Alci Sanchez, right? But I don't know. I'll check. And so the question is, if Patricia Rojas is Rojas Sanchez, why is that? She could be Zuleima Molero Villamizar, right? Or Zuleima de Espina, or Zuleima de Méndez. But like in none of those names there is a Rojas or a Sanchez. And Salvador, or Andrés Salvador, also doesn't have Rojas or Sanchez. So I don't understand what the relationship is. But anyhow, it's just a minor detail, right? And by the way, who reconnected me with Patricia Rojas and Francisco Castillo here in Katy was my former partner around 2016. Right? So I don't know. It seems consistent that there might be a relationship, but I just don't know what it is. Okay, so let me see. I have a few notes of things that I want to talk about. Okay, so this is important. So let's talk about the yellow traffic lights. Okay, and this is also a question. I think I have a few questions for the informant today. So the informant told me recently, last week, I don't recall exactly what day, that they were doing rules, the same rules that they were doing before, right? Where they're playing again with the timing of the traffic lights in Katy. Like, because, the Fort Bend County Police, they control those lights, right? So the rules is, they changed the tactic, right, when they're following me. Now, before they were trying to block me at the traffic light, right? Because the goal was to stop me there to listen to what I say. But these days, according to the informant, the tactic is the opposite, is to leave the intersection open, okay? And the goal is that when I reach the intersection, they turn the traffic light yellow to make me run it, right? To make me make a choice of whether to go through or not, right? To put it in a way, right? To increase the probability that I would run a red light. Oh, this is interesting. I see how it works. I see how it works. I understand. I'll tell you this in a bit. Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, this is. I mean, I just discovered something that is a game changer. I think. I understood. Okay, I'll tell you this in a bit. Okay, so the technique is, leave the intersection open, follow him from behind, harassing him a little bit, right? I mean, all this came from the informant, right? This is basically the instructions that they have. Harass him a little bit from the back, right? Like, drive at higher speed, close to him. Make him try to exceed the speed limit, which is pretty much impossible because I limited the speed of the car. I mean, in the highway, right? I cannot go over. But when I reach a traffic light, leave the intersection open, put it in yellow, right? And because he's already at the maximum speed of that road, he will likely try to, pass, and we may get him with a red light. And then, so I'll tell you this exit, and this is going to be relevant in a second. 751 on I-10. So the exit with this to the 6. So. Okay, so yeah, sorry, the traffic is a bit heavy today, so I'm being careful. Yes, so the idea is to maximize that probability, right? I have technology to detect this because this happened before, and I built a detection system, basically to measure how many times I encounter a free intersection that turns yellow as I approach, right? A traffic light that is free for me to pass, but it turns yellow, seconds before I get there. And when the informant told me the last time this, I verified this through software, and it was true. So I have to do the same check. I haven't done it, right? But the idea is to fabricate another traffic, ticket for running a red light. It's just, more character assassination, more opportunities for them to find me in contempt, to send me the notice to the wrong address because, they would send it to the other address where the house is marked as vacant, and then they would say that it was impossible to forward. I don't get the notice, and then they put me in jail, right? Something like that. Now, but I see a challenge, and this is the question I have to ask the informant: if he has seen any of the photos of the traffic lights. Because I think there is a technical challenge for them here, right? That it's gonna be hard for them to explain, and might be a way for the authorities when they investigate this to see that they're guilty, right? And it's the following: this car, first of all, has the wrap right on top. So you see this car through a traffic camera, you shouldn't be able to distinguish the make or the model, even, right? Secondly, the car doesn't have a license plate on the front. Right, and and third, this car is surrounded by infrared cameras and has a big infrared light on the back. So I think probably that traffic light probably wouldn't be able to capture, with enough precision that plate. I imagine, right? I'm just telling you as an engineer. So how they're going to justify that they know? Imagine, right, that I do run a red light. Suppose that happens. I don't know. I haven't checked the footage to see if this has happened, because maybe it already happened. I don't know, right? Maybe they got me distracted and I didn't even notice, right? But imagine that this happens. How they're going to justify? I mean, the officer issuing the citation or whatever it is, right? The ticket, whatever. How they're going to justify that they knew that the person driving that weird car with that camouflage wrap was Reynaldo J. Aguiar Marcano? If the plate is not visible, probably from the camera because of the infrared lights of my own cameras, and because the car has this wrap that you cannot even tell which kind of car it is, and it doesn't have a license plate on the front. So they're going to have to admit that they are following me real time,
and they know that that car is me, right? So they're going to have to admit that they're using the state infrastructure paid with taxpayer money to conduct illegal surveillance for Jostaro Cabello. That's what it means, right? If they issue this citation, that is what that implies. So I don't know. It seems to me like a self-destructive move, but I don't know. It's just me, right? That drives that conclusion. I don't know if there might be other explanation how they can justify this, right? I don't know really. I think the solution would be to have a police visually there, right, when they pull these rules, and then the police stops me and asks me for my ID, right? That would be the only way. But then that would show that they're doing the two things coordinated with the police officer, which is even worse, right? Like, I mean, they have the police officer physically present while they pull off these rules with the traffic lights. So I don't know. It seems to me like like something that doesn't that is not a good idea. Um, but so the question I have for informant is if you have had a chance to see those photos that they have taken with those cameras, right? Because, well, if you have seen it, first of all, that would be explosive information for me, because that, I mean, if somebody in Venezuela can get the footage of the traffic cameras of the police in Fort Bend County, I mean that would be like the best proof that I could have for my lawsuit, right? So I don't know if you have seen those photos, and then beyond that, if you have seen them, if you can tell me if the plate is readable by that system, right? To see if they really can do this automatically, right? Supposedly, because they're gonna say that this is an automated system, that this is no harassment, but this is an automated system. But the question is if the plate is really readable by that system, right? Given all the cameras that I have on top of the car and all that. Which I don't know. The only way to know this is to look at that photo, right? So I don't know. To be clear, I'm not asking you to send me the photo, and please don't send me the photo, because that would be a crime, okay? And I'm not in the business of committing any crimes. I just want to know if you have access to that photo. That's all I need to know. And if you do, if you can tell me if you can see the plate. So anyhow, the thing that I understood was the following, right? When I was at that point in the I-10, right, there was a car behind me that was following me at close range for like 5 minutes, consistent speed. Like, he was obviously trying to maintain a fixed distance between him or her and my vehicle, right? And the idea of that is because they need the constant distance to be able to download the audio, right? And he or she they were doing this for like 5 minutes, right? So I know they're listening, right? And he doesn't move, right? Like, he doesn't go away. And I'm talking about, like the first things that I was saying at the beginning, right? That are not very, not very important. But then I switched topic and I started talking about the rules with the red lights and the yellow lights of the traffic lights, right? The minute I said that car broke away and passed me. And then another car came in and took its place. So I think I understand what's happening. And now I understand why is that they have to listen real time. Because this was a question for me that I had for a long time. Why these agents seem to have the ability to listen from their vehicles, right? Because, I mean, as a security, I know this network uses, and every intelligence agency, right, uses information asymmetry. To manage the agents, right, so they don't become risk. So why and this one did the same, right? As I'm talking about this, this is one B24798M, I think. It's a black plate, and it's a compact SUV gray. So I've always had the question, why do they let them listen, right? Because I could be talking about explosive things, and the agent could go and talk to somebody else, and this could lead to chaos, right, in their organization, desertions and things like that. It seems like to me like a dangerous thing. So for the network, right, to let all these agents listen to what I'm saying. So I never understood why they do it that way, right? But I think this is the reason why. So this is what they do. This is, of course, an hypothesis, right? And I don't know. I hope somebody, after this is over, somebody gives me the pleasure of knowing if this was true, right? I mean, if this guess was correct. But this is what I think they're doing. So the way they create the information asymmetry is by partitioning the conversation, right, across different agents. So they only let each agent listen to a small piece of the conversation. Okay, that's this way. No agent has all the conversation, right? Only the leaders of the network. Only Diosdado Cabello has the full conversation, right? Or Robert Mueller, I don't know, right? After a certain level, they will have all the conversation, but not the ground agent. They will only have 10 seconds of audio, and with 10 seconds of audio, you cannot make sense of what he's even talking about, right? But that's not the important part. The important part is why he broke away and passed me when I started talking about the police of Fort Bend County and the red light. So the task they have is to follow me and listen to everything I say, and if until the point I mention something that is critical, that is important, that is urgent for the network to know, right? Like I'm giving information about what they're doing with the traffic cameras, because if somebody listens to this that is in the authorities, they will go immediately, and they could, right? They could go immediately and take advantage, or like take the high ground and catch the officers in the act, right? So they have to know the second I say this, right? So that's the job of that agent, to listen in real time with a headphone, right? And the moment I say something that is critical, well, I mean, maybe it's not him, right? Oh, I see. Yeah, it's not him. I understand. Is the system, right? So this app that they have, that is like an Uber of espionage, is sending the chunks of audio, and when some analyst somewhere determines this is critical, then they cut off that agent, and they make him break away from me, and they bring another agent to create this information asymmetry, and also so that there is no, so maybe who's listening in real time is not really the person in the car, it's the analyst, right? That is somewhere, I don't know, could be in Caracas, could be in China, I don't know, right? But so this means that the goal of this is that this agent, or this device that the agent is carrying, doesn't have the full conversation in case he gets arrested or detained or whatever, right? And the phone sees the full conversation is not recoverable, right? That could be a reason to reduce liability in that sense. But also to split the communication in chunks, because that way it also lowers the risk of interception when they're transmitting it to Caracas or to China. Right? So if the FBI is already watching this agent and has, I don't know, his phone tap or whatever, right? Whatever mechanism is, and they get the data stream, they only will get that small chunk. So I don't know, it seems like this is the TTP, right? When I say something that is critical, they make the agent break away, and then they bring another one. But I think the agent is listening, because when I see things that personally affect the agent, they move, right? So, for example, there was an instance when I was close to the FBI headquarters that day, right, recently, last week, that there was a white Toyota, and I said something about that white Toyota, the plate, I don't recall what I said, but the guy almost ran the red light. Like, he almost did it, right? Like, he got afraid, I imagine, right? Like, he reacted to what I said. And that tells me that he saw personal liability, right? That's probably his vehicle, or is tied to him in some way. It's not one of these rotatable vehicles, right? Like swappable. This is his real vehicle, and he saw personal liability. Or the white Toyota was his his personal vehicle, and he saw liability, and he decided to almost run the red light. So I think the agents have the ability to. So I don't know. Maybe the analyst is the agent, right? The analyst that is making this triage decision is the agent in the vehicle, but only for a few seconds, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense actually. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I have to think about this problem more from an engineering standpoint, right? But this also has a tremendous advantage. Think about it, right? If you have one analyst in Caracas or Beijing, right, or whatever, then that is a concentrated risk, because that analyst could desert, could ask for asylum in the U.S. and talk. And he has all the information because he listened with his own ears to, an entire conversation that could have been critical, right? But if the analyst is the agent in the car, right next to me, listening only for, say, 10 seconds or 20 seconds of an important conversation, then what they're really doing from a software engineering or distributed systems point of view, they're partitioning the agent. They're partitioning the analyst, right? So it's a partition analyst, really, what they're creating. They are splitting the risk of having the analyst into thousands of, zero analysts, because they only have to make one call, right, through a day, and by listening to 10 segments. So I don't know, it could be a good paradigm shift on the way that intelligence agencies operate, right? Because I think traditional intelligence agencies have an analyst that is tasked with a task, right, of analyzing a thing from start to end. But what they're doing is they're splitting the task into thousands, and they have one meta analyst analyzing the task just for an instant, right? Each one. I think that's what they're doing. Yeah, it feels like that's the right answer. Right? This way, they split the risk. Right? The risk gets lower significantly. Because like if you want to have all the conversation, the FBI. I mean, suppose you are the FBI, right? If you want to have all this conversation, all the critical things that I could have said since I left home, you would have to interrogate like 12 people, right? Not a single person will have all the information. This is an interesting thought, right? Right. Yeah, I see. Yeah. So this is, yeah. Wow. So this is really a Google principle. Okay. So I don't know. I'm not gonna get into the technical details too much because it would make this conversation too long. But if you think of Muppet, right? The system that this is not copyright or trademark or intellectual property. Like, this is a generic information retrieval systems technique, right? So if you think of an information of a distributed search engine, I talked about in some demos, right, where you have the leaves, you have the parents, you have the you have another level of aggregation on top. It's like a triangle, right? It's like a pyramid. So the philosophy in these distributed search systems is to always move the work to the leaves if you can. Precisely for this reason, because it splits the risk, it scales better, it's cheaper, right? And it's more scalable, right? This way, yeah, this makes total sense. So what they're doing really is they're moving this work of the intelligence analyst to the leaf. Right? So the intelligence analyst is not in Fortuna. These are the intelligence analysts, but these are the intelligence analysts in this operation, right? They are splitting the task of an intelligence analyst into thousands, right? And that way the risk is diluted, and it scales better because they can do the same thing in any locale, right? They can do the same thing in China, in Russia, regardless of the language, because they have local leaves, right? Like, they have the local agents in that area that speak that language, right? So it's more scalable, right? They don't have to have polyglots, right? That can polyglot analysts, right? That can understand multiple languages and things like that. It scales much better. So this is what it is, right? So, but you see here, this is another example of them applying Google principles to espionage. It's a one-to-one mapping. What we're seeing here are the leaves of the search retrieval tree. All right. This is a beautiful thing to see, to be honest with you. Yeah, they're ingenious. Wow. And they're being aggressive as they drive. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I was just setting up the GPS to make sure that I don't miss the exit. Yes, so that's what I observed in that situation, and I think that's the reason. That's why they follow me close, and then they break away, because the analyst, this instant analyst, this leaf of analyst, made the call that this is important to deliver, right? And then he goes away somewhere else when there is an interception. I mean, the system, right, routes an intersection with another car or house or whatever, right, where they deliver the data, and then the data gets transmitted one hop via satellite to Caracas or to whatever, right? That's the goal. Yeah, so I mean, this thing that I'm saying, right? Though I summarized it and made a short description of what I'm seeing, it's really a deep topic. Okay, I mean, I could go deeper on this and create a technical session of maybe 3 or 4 hours just to talk about all the different things that I see on how they're splitting the job of an analyst, of an intelligence analyst, into these leaves. Okay. Yeah, they're gonna create an incident with these cars today. That's clear to me. So I'm gonna stop to give them the opportunity to pass. Like they already brought like 2 trucks that almost ran me over, right? And that other truck as well. And I'm driving at 65 miles per hour, which is a speed limit, right? So it's not like I'm driving slow or and there's no traffic. So it is clear to me that they're probably going to create an incident, right? Because they see that I'm going to FedEx, that I'm going to file the petition again, and they see risk on that, right? So I let all the trucks pass. Let's see. All right. And I'm on the rightmost lane, like on the slower lane. Right? Anyhow, yes. So on this, I can see. I could give a technical session about all the properties that I can see of the things that they accomplish with this. I'm just oversimplifying it because I don't want to make this demo too technical. But I guess my message is, if somebody investigates this and I end up, winning this, please remind me to tell you all those things, right? I mean, to the winning team, right? Because they're important technical things and they have important properties that I'm able to see them because I had that training at Google, and because I worked at Google for 10 years as a ranking engineer, and I'm exposed to this situation, right? So it's two unique circumstances colliding in time, and it's unlikely that that there's another person that has those two circumstances. So it could be, a unique piece of information for the FBI, is what I think, right? So I would love to give this to you. Anyhow, so let me see what else I have on my list. So we talked about the traffic lights, right? Yes. I can't see, to be honest. Well, I can't see. Oh yes. The other thing I wanted to tell you, I got information from the informant. This was a long time ago, and he told me that, and I don't know, like this is unverified information. Really, I cannot. It's just a tip, right? In case this gets investigated, and it could be useful information for investigators. I don't know. But he told me, because I asked the question some time ago to the informant, what was the price tag? I was curious to know how much you would have. If you are Diosdado Cabello, right? I don't know. I'm just curious. What is the price of this, right? Of doing this to another human being. So I wanted to know, and I asked this question to the informant: how much they paid Andres Salvador Andres Salvador Mendez Espina, right? To put his wife on this position for 10 years and do all these things targeting me, right? Like, what is the price tag of that? How much did they pay him, right? The number the informant told me that he think is the right number is $6 million, but I don't know if that is true, right? But that's the ballpark, I guess, right? So, if authorities investigate this, they should be looking for around $6 million, according to the informant, right? It could be that that's the amount that is in that secret bank account that they have in Rotterdam, or it could be that this in the crypto wallet. Like, he didn't tell me really where it is, right? But I have the crypto wallet, so and it's supposed $6 million, right? So just another data point. Now, I'm almost there. I think I am 40 minutes away. 40 minutes, yeah, right. So I'm going to talk about something else. I'm going to talk about the New York crew. One of the New York crews, right? So I want to talk about Nelson Lara and those people, right? Because it was an interesting rules. Yes, I'm not going to get too much into the details because I only have 14 minutes, but I'm going to just give you the overall, right? So the overall was, after they did that rules with Damon Sachs and Penelope Suarez on 2000, I believe it was 2018, right? Around June, July 2018. After they did that rules, of course, I was emotionally devastated, right? So what they did is that a character by the name of Irma Bravo introduced me to another person by the name of Maria Eugenia Rojas in New York. And then Maria Eugenia Rojas in turn introduced me to supposedly her uncle, who supposedly was called Rafael Ramirez, but not the Rafael Ramirez, that was the ambassador in the UN, that was the neighbor of my parents in a way in Maracaibo, right, in that area. It's not the same. This Rafael Ramirez was an older gentleman in his late 70s, or is, I don't know. I don't know, I haven't talked to him. But supposedly, right, so the story they told me is that he was a very wealthy businessman, that he was supposedly, and the person who told me this was Nelson Lara. He told me that this Rafael Ramirez, when he was young, he was a spy. And he specifically say an oil spy. Like, his job was to spy on the oil industry for the Iranians. And that's why he's married to an Iranian woman. But this was years ago, right? Like in the 80s and the 90s, right? Because he's older now. Now I don't know if any of this is true. This is what Nelson Lara told me, but I have to tell you, whatever Nelson Lara has told me, like for example when he told me about the OpenSea transfers, and I talked about this in a demo, that is pretty accurate. After I got the geo index, I can see that it's accurate, right? So I don't know. I would think that it could be true, right? But anyhow, that's not the important part. So the rules was, Maria Eugenia and I start dating, right? And she's an agent, right? Like, she did multiple ruses, and she even at some point even helped me, quote unquote, with my company, right? Like, she helped me do the marketing, and but of course it was just another vector of attack, right? For the company itself, and this was with key opinion leaders. She introduced me to a marketing consultant, like, who asked me a bunch of questions, a questionnaire, right? Imagine that. Me answering a questionnaire for Bob Briscoe and Travis Kalanick, right? That was basically what it was. But anyhow, and she did that ruse in the Hamptons, where they sat me next to, we were in a restaurant, and they sat me next to, what was his name? The Beatle, Paul McCartney, right? She took me to a restaurant in the Hamptons that was very exclusive, and next to me, like 3 feet away, literally next to me, was Paul McCartney. Right? And at the same time, when I was in the parking lot, Ana Codalo, who is also an agent and has been infiltrated for 25 years, she calls me and start asking me technical questions about Calcularo Health. Right? I believe the rules was that if the intellectual property rules, so see, this guy has the marker, right? He has this attachment, color, bright, interesting, and he was following me consistently, right? At consistent speed, I mean. So anyhow, so Ana Codalo calls me in the parking lot and starts asking me technical questions, right? I believe the rules was if they brought an intellectual property lawsuit against me, right, they would say that Travis Kalanick was at that restaurant with Paul McCartney or somebody from his team, somebody high up, right? And they listened to this crazy person ramble about things, right? Or that they were talking about this technical thing during the dinner, and I was next to them and I heard the conversation, right? And then I went to the parking lot and told somebody about it, right? So I stole the idea in the restaurant. I think that's the rules, right? And then Ana Codalo, because she is an agent, right? She would testify for them. She would corroborate what they're saying. She would say, yes, he called me that night and he talked about this and this and this and this, which would be consistent with what Travis Kalanick and Paul McCartney would say about the conversation that happened in that table, right? So who is the judge going to believe? Paul McCartney and Travis Kalanick, or Rinaldo Aguiar, who is this supposedly crazy person that Phil Denning has been discrediting, or the equivalent of Phil Denning, right? Like Cinere Strain, and at the time Phil Denning wasn't in the picture, but Cinere Strain and Scott Weinstein and all these people have been discrediting for 2 or 3 years, right? Of course, they would believe Paul McCartney, right? So I think that was the rules, right? So, but what I wanted to tell you is that, and this is important because this might be hard evidence, right? So the rules was Maria Eugenia Rojas introduced me to both Nelson Lara and who supposedly was her uncle, right? I don't think it's the uncle. Maybe it's the father or stepfather. I don't know, right? But okay. So she introduced me to Nelson Lara, and she introduced me to this Rafael Ramirez, who supposedly Rafael Ramirez was her uncle, sorry, and Nelson Lara was supposedly was a business associate of her uncle. That's the story she told me. Which is an interesting question on itself, right? Because if Rafael Ramirez is her uncle, I mean, she's Rojas. She's Maria Eugenia Rojas, which means her father was Rojas. And supposedly, he was the brother of his father. So he should be Rojas. Or she should be Ramirez. Like, it doesn't make much sense, right? But I don't know. I didn't think about this before. But anyhow, that's the story they told me. So they brought me. So she said, well, my uncle is a very wealthy man. I mean, this person that Nelson Lara told me later that supposedly was a spy, right? An oil spy for the Iranians. He's a very wealthy man and he's looking to invest in a tech company, right? Exactly what I needed, because I was fighting this fight with, Bob Briscoe and Travis Kalanick. I needed funding, I needed backup, I needed servers, I needed to buy Superdomes. So this, seemed like a good, opportunity to explore. So she set up a meeting in the offices of Rafael Ramirez in New York. And one of the times that I went to New York to work there at the office, at Goldman Sachs, I went there. And I gave him a demo. And in the demo is when I personally met Nelson Lara. Nelson Lara is younger than Rafael Ramirez. He's probably on his 60s, or maybe late 60s. And I gave the two of them the demo, right? Rafael Ramirez, the older gentleman, he didn't seem to understand what I was talking about. Like, he didn't ask any questions. He was falling asleep during the meeting. It wasn't, But Nelson Lara was on point. He was very aware. He understood the technical concepts. He understood the power of the technology I was describing, which is not is a very abstract technology, to be honest with you. And he grasped it. Like, I was impressed. I was like, man, this man is intelligent. Like, because he's not an engineer. He's a politician, right? How does he understand these things? But anyhow, he understood, right? And I was grateful for that. And he proposed to register a company in Delaware between Rafael Ramirez and myself, and we did that, right? This company didn't go anywhere, of course, because they made sure that it did never progress. But they have that paperwork, right? So I think this works with the intellectual property lawsuit that they were going to fabricate. I mean, it was evidence, right? They were fabricating evidence for that lawsuit. But this is a weakness because this has the signature of that Rafael Ramirez and the company they used to register the company, all those things, right? And I have a copy of this paperwork at my home. So it could be an interesting thing for the authorities to explore. I imagine, right? That's why I'm mentioning this. Yes. So this thing with Maria Eugenia Rojas was around the same time that Dr. Vitenas came into play. And Dr. Vitenas is that doctor in Houston that Andres Salvador Mendez Espina basically hired through the Venezuelan intelligence to conduct an unauthorized medical procedure on me. And I'll give more details to the authorities about what that is, right? But that's so Maria Eugenia Rojas was introduced in this mix at exactly the same time, right? So you see, it's a multi-front attack. It's a military technique, really. Okay, so let me check my. Oh yes, this is interesting. In one of the previous demos, right? I think it was 109. I talked about 110. I talked about how the Chinese are using the visible light spectrum to communicate, right, and to conduct surveillance on everybody. And the weakness that we have is that this thing is not regulated. That spectrum is not regulated by anybody, so they can do whatever they want, right? And the rest of us are communicating in a spectrum that they control because they manufacture the electronics, right? So that's the asymmetry that they're exploiting that led to this situation. But so two things I want to tell you. In that context, I was talking about the objects that are visible from the satellite, right? That they use to encode things and messages. But I want to tell you another thing. I also realized that these cameras that they have mounted on the surveillance cars are also part of this, right? I mean, they fall into the same category. Why? Well, because they have all these cameras in these vehicles that are recording all the environment all the time, and they are coordinating these recordings through computer systems that are distributed computing, right? So this is very powerful computing. And there's no regulation against having a camera in a public place, right? But what that cameras are doing is really capturing information from the environment, right? Through the visible light spectrum. That was my first thought, okay? So I thought, well, I'm just walking you through my line of thought to tell you something that is important. I thought, well, this is the same, right? They're installing sensors that capture information from the visible light spectrum. So it's in the other direction. Instead of sending information, they're receiving information through the visible light spectrum. And this is not regulated. Nobody can regulate the light that reflects on your body, right? This is what their cameras capture, right? The light that reflects on your car. And they send that to China, right? I mean, fundamentally, that's what it is, really. And then in China, they coordinate this with computer vision, and then they figure out where everybody is at all times. But then, after I have that thought, right, so the thought is, well, the camera system is the same. It's a use of an unregulated spectrum in the most fundamental way, right? But on the other direction, it's sensing instead of transmitting. But then I thought, well, this is not completely true, because by experimentation, I can tell you the experiments I've done with the infrared lights that I have, right? That I can blind their cameras with infrared, right? And I tell you this because I have experimented with this a lot, and I know I can blind them. So this tells me that their computer vision system it's based on regular visible light, but also uses infrared light, right? So this means that they have to have LiDAR or infrared light or something else in those espionage machines, right? So here they did this thing. As soon as I started talking about this regulation and stuff, the car that was listening broke away. It's that red car that is driving over there. and he's speeding to deliver this information as soon as possible, right? Okay, but this is the interesting thought, right? Well, that spectrum is regulated, and I think it is, at least in the US, because if you look at your remote control, which is infrared, it says on the back that this complies with the FCC rules and it cites the rules, right? So this means that those cameras that they have, I mean, I don't know, like I'm not an FCC lawyer, right? I have to give you that disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, right? In any way. So what I'm telling you is just from I missed the exit. What I'm telling you is just from inference, right? From inference. Um, those devices that they have mounted on the behind the rear view mirror, that is the computer vision cameras, that because of the experimentation I've done, I can tell you that it uses infrared or so. Yeah, it's infrared because I blind them with infrared. So it means that these sensors are sensitive to infrared, and for that to work, they have to have infrared lights installed in there, right? Some form of them. So those devices should probably be regulated already, right? And that means that they could be, if they're not compliant, if they haven't been authorized by the FCC to operate, they could be, seized. So this could be a legal weapon, right? A tremendous legal weapon. Yes, and I'm telling you this because my observation of the remote controls of the TV, right? Like they said, this complies with the FCC regulations. Those TV are not radio frequency based; they are infrared based. So I think there's regulation on the infrared spectrum. I'll check this when I get home, but it's possible, right? And if that's the case, this could be a way to legally seize those machines. And the other interesting thought that I had thinking about this is the same thing that I told you before. If there was a law that mandated that every recording device has to have a visible signal telling everybody that is recording, this would also destroy this, right? Because all these cars would have to be driving around with a red light behind the windshield, right? And then people would be aware, oh, this thing is recording, right? And it would be visible and obvious to everybody that this is a coordinated effort following somebody, right? So that is another way to disable this, right? To force those devices on the behind the windshield to disclose publicly that they're recording when they're recording. And in fact, it should be even. I would make the argument that a device should also disclose when it's transmitting, not only when it's recording, because that's obviously what they're exploiting, that nobody knows when they're transmitting information, right? So there should be a law that tells anybody, hey, this thing is live and transmitting data, because obviously data is a weapon that the Chinese are exploiting, right? So if there was legislation to make devices signal when they're recording and when they're transmitting publicly, that would disable this thing, right? What they do. Now your destination is on the right. All right, I arrived to the shipping center, so I'm going to send my petition for writ of mandamus again to see what happens this time.
Hello. Yes. So today is February 17th, 2026. It's 7:18 p.m. U.S. Central Time. My name is Rinaldo J. Aguiar Marcano, and this is the third segment of Demo 111. So 111. Just a second. Sorry about that. Just setting up.
my headset. Yes. So uh, this evening I'm going to go truffle hunting, and we're going to talk about some technical, um, let's call it topics, technical topics, right? So let's jump right into it. So it's about that thing that I saw in the morning when I was going to FedEx. That one vehicle was following me consistently, downloading the audio from my car, from the rear view mirror, basically. And this is interesting. Yeah, I'll tell you something about that house in a second. So the house that is on the same position as Gary Gray's house, but on the next street. There was something funny that they did with that house, I don't know, like a year ago, more than a year ago, a year and a half ago. So anyhow, in that when I saw that observation, I real time analyzed it, right? And I saw a couple of possibilities, and I went back and forth and kind of analyzed the possible things, right? That there could be, and I said something like, obviously, I need to think more about this problem, right? Like there's a few things that I still don't understand very well how they work. So what happened was, after I got home, I started doing what I do, right? When I see these things, and I started thinking, I put my engineer's hat on, and I started thinking, okay, how would I design a system to do this? Right? Like, if I was to design this, how would I do it? And then, I saw a couple of subtleties that I think could explain a few. Like, I think that not subtleties, but like more details. Like, I got more. I was able to see beyond my initial observations, right? Right. So I just wanted to tell you about that, right, in case it helps anybody. So let me be careful here with the speed, because I know, because of the informant told me, right, that they're trying to trick me into running a light or something. So we have to be always under the limit of the speed limit of the road. So anyhow, yeah. So I started thinking about how I would design this. Not only from a technical point of view, but also understanding what are the problems that they're trying to solve, or that they have to solve, right? So let's start by that. Let's start by analyzing the different problems they have, okay? And the problems are really a consequence of the size of their network and the amount of crimes that they commit on multiple industries, right? Let's call it that way, or in multiple verticals. Like, they're in the business of kidnapping children, they're in the business of forced organs transplants, they're in the business of unauthorized medical procedures, they're in the business of unlawful incarceration. They're in, they are in different verticals in the criminal world. Judiciary fraud, and this has implications, right? Because how do I say this? I think this is the biggest implication, right, of the ones that I'm going to say. You wouldn't want, if you're a criminal network of their size, right, like, you wouldn't want, for example, a judge, right, that may be working for the network, to have visibility into the crimes they are maybe committing in drug trafficking, for example, to give an idea, right? Because the judge will understand the level of liability that this personally brings to him or her, and he would probably quit, right? So they wouldn't want a judge to hear the things related to drug trafficking, for example, right? But still, they need the judge to be able to hear things about, judicial crimes, right? So, if the target is talking about their legal strategy, they need the judge to be able to hear that, right? So they can make a decision on how they're going to defeat the target, right? To foresee what document is going to file, or what is going to be the legal argument, whatever, right? So this requires a judge, right, or an attorney to hear this information. But if it's an information about, if I'm talking about how Nelson Lara told me about the OpenSea transfer for evading sanctions and for the drug trafficking, then, they wouldn't want a judge or an attorney to hear this information, because they will understand the trouble that they're getting themselves into, right? So what this really poses is a problem of triage, right? Of triage on the topic. What is the topic of the conversation? Now, this I have to tell you, I don't know, because I imagine, right? This is kind of a special situation for them, right? Let me think about how to phrase this, because I don't want this to be misinterpreted, right? I don't, it might sound like how do I say this? It could sound like I'm self-aggrandizing in a way, right? What I'm going to say. But I think this might be a special situation for them because of the range I have on this. But let me qualify that comment, okay? What I mean by this is that, as you can see, I have at this point the ability to talk about things like counterintelligence, or I could talk about legal strategy, or I could talk about information retrieval systems, right? Or I could talk about judiciary fraud, or I could talk about, crimes against humanity, right? So it's a range, it's a wide range. Now, I imagine this is not the regular situation that they have to deal with. I imagine that when they have a target, that is, for example, a judge, right? So that target is on the legal arena, right? So they will have to route that information mostly to legal actors, right? Or sometimes maybe intelligence officers, but it's not, they don't, maybe the triage is easier, right? Is what I'm trying to say, right? For 99% of the targets, right? But every once in a while, they will get into a situation with a target that could talk about multiple topics, right? Now, I also want to tell you the reason why I make this comment about my range is not, this doesn't mean that I'm smarter than them. It's just that they've been training me for 25 years and they've been attacking me. So at the beginning, they started attacking my companies, the tech companies that I was creating, like, loquegustes.com and Calcularo Health. And, I've talked about this multiple times. And these were companies in e-commerce, in tech, health tech, and things like that, right? So different areas as well, different areas of knowledge, right? But all tech companies, right? But then they escalated to, harassment with surveillance, right? And then I had to learn about counter surveillance to be able to fight them, right? And I started, building computer vision systems and things like that. And I learned about these topics in the process. And then they started attacking me with attorneys and judges, right? And then I had to learn about the legal system, because I cannot hire an attorney, because, I've tried in the past, but they give me their attorneys, right? So they assign attorneys that, work for them, right? For my adversaries. So, I understood years ago that this is, it's not a path, it's not a viable path. I cannot go and find an attorney. I have to learn how to do this myself. So anyhow, in this process, they train me in all these areas, and this is what gives me the range. It's not, that I'm better than them or anything like that. It's just that they train me, right, in all these different areas. But back to the topic, the problem that this poses for them is the problem of range, that they don't know what I'm going to talk about, right? And they need to be able. So I think this poses a problem of triage, not because of the range on itself, but because they need to keep the information compartmentalized. They don't want a judge to understand that they're really working for a drug trafficking organization, right? For obvious reasons. Maybe the judge suspects it, I don't know, right? But they don't want the judge to know the extent of the criminal operation. Let's put it that way. So that's the first problem, right? Triage in terms of the topic of the conversation. They have to do it. They're forced to do it. But there is also another type of triage, which is triage on the, let's call it the security clearance, okay? What I described this morning, I think is accurate, right? So what they're doing with, like splitting the task of an intelligence analyst into hundreds of individuals, right? And I explained the advantages of this in the previous segment of this demo, which was recorded this morning. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. But I also think that they have a triage for. So the way I described it this morning was, imagine an information retrieval tree, right? Like a distributed system. I represented it visually as a triangle, right? In that segment. So imagine that, right, where you have leaves. You have those leaves have parents. I'm talking about computer science, right? And the parents have parents, and at the end you get to the root, and that's what computes at the end the final solution, right? So I think if you want to see it visually, what I'm saying is that in this augmented vision of this design that I'm seeing at this point, is probably not one tree but multiple trees, right? So they have not one triangle but multiple triangles. They have a triangle for intelligence, a triangle for judicial topics, a triangle for medical topics, a triangle for academic topics or educational topics, like education systems, right? They have different triangles, right? And they're isolated, and that helps them because then they don't have to share, like they don't have to tell everybody the extent of the criminal organization, right? They can keep that to themselves. So that's an important property for them to have. But also, what I was going to tell you, so imagine they have multiple triangles, right? One for each topic. That's the idea. So different identically structured organizations, but they're parallel, right? They don't talk to each other. They're separate. They're compartmentalized. But then on top of that, I think that the first level so in this pyramid, right, where they have the agents at the bottom, right, that are the ones that are following me all the time, these are like the lower level of the leaves. So the leaves also have tiers. Well, you can think about the leaves and the parents, right? So I mean, I wish I had something graphical to show you, but because I'm doing this on the car, it's difficult. So I'll try to describe it, right? But imagine a triangle. The bottom of the triangle are the leaves, right? So these ground agents that are following me 24/7, right? In this case, or every other target, like they do the same to everybody. So the minute the agent here, so the job of that so I imagine, right? They have this standardized. So I imagine that this agent is trained to listen to determine whether this is an intelligence conversation or a medical conversation or a judiciary conversation, or like what is the topic, right? And the level of severity, like is this something critical, is this something that it's that might not be important, is this something that somebody could be arrested if this gets to the FBI, right? Things like that. It's a triage, right? So but that's the only thing this engine has to do, like distinguish the topic and the severity, right? So depending on the topic, then they select the right tree, right? The right triangle. Okay, so he's talking about the unauthorized medical procedure that Andres Salvador Mendez Espina ordered for him, right? Also, he's talking about medical liability or medical and legal liability, right? So they can either pick the legal triangle or the medical triangle, right? And then imagine they also have standardized which exactly to pick, right? Which one. So say that they pick the medical triangle, right? But he's talking about an unauthorized medical procedure. I mean, this is a serious crime against humanity, right? This is a lesa, I don't know how to say it in English, like lesa humanidad, we say in Spanish. Like I think it's crime against humanity, right? I mean, this is something that it's serious, right? It's an atrocity, really. So this would fall on more on the upper half of the medical triangle, right? So not even within, what I'm trying to say is that even without the medical triangle, it's not like every agent in that not every leaf is authorized. I mean, probably not even the leaves are authorized to hear this, right? Because the same reason. If they knew that they are performing unconsented medical procedures on people, or that they're doing forced organ harvesting, people would quit, right? No, because 99% of the population wouldn't be comfortable working for an organization, even if they're making a lot of money, that is doing these things, right? And they can go and talk to the FBI. So not the leaves, even in that medical triangle, are probably not authorized to listen to this, right? So in this example, they would bring a parent level 1 of one of the leaves, or a parent even level 2, right? Somebody higher up. Uh, and this setup, and then like and that person also has a similar task but at a higher level, right? Because now the person that is following is trained to understand this specific topic and can discern even better the level of severity of what I'm saying. And then he could decide, okay, this is something I can listen to or root, or I have to break away and let escalate. Basically, do I have to escalate this to a person with more clearance, right? uh, and then if that decision, then that person would break away, and that is the signal, escalation. And then the system already knows, okay, we were at medical level 3 and he broke away, so now we have to bring a medical level 4, right? And that way, it's easy to manage, and they don't have to communicate about the details, right? It's just bubbles up from there, right? So it's an interesting design, but this also has an immense advantage in terms of defeating the techniques or the tactics of the FBI. Why? Well, because the leaves, so the agents at the bottom, right, the ones that are physically getting close to my car, are the lowest possible level, right? I mean, in a way, they also act as human shield for the real dangerous agents, right? The level 2, level 3, level 4, etc., right? Because they are further away in the queue, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say, if you're the FBI, don't concentrate too much on the guy that is next to me or that is behind me. Wait until he breaks away, and then pay attention to the one that comes after. So you have to pay attention to the second one or the third one, because the one that is following me consistently, his job is to stay behind me for as long as he can, until I say something that they seem that they judge as dangerous to them, right? And at that point, they will bring the heavier guy, and that's the one you want to get. You don't want to get the guy that is making $20 an hour, right? You want to get the guy that has millions of points in crypto, I think, right? I imagine. Yeah, so like in a way, this makes these lower level agents act as human shield, right? Which is, if you think about it philosophically, is the same thing that Diosdado Cabello did with Nicolas Maduro. It's the same thing, right? Like, Nicolas Maduro was his human shield, right? And it worked. Like, who got caught? Nicolas Maduro, right? Like, Diosdado Cabello is happy like a camper, right? And now he just put a different human shield, this time a woman, right? Because it's harder to capture a woman president. I mean, to justify that, right? Um, but it's the same principle, right? So you don't want to be. I mean, you don't want, if you are the top dog, you don't want to be next to the target, unless it's something that is worth it, and for the shortest amount of time needed. Like, you don't want to be following this target all day, for obvious reasons. You want to be close, but not that close, right? The same principle, the same thing that Diosdado does, right? When, in terms of managing the country. Okay, right. So here you see they have this queue of vehicles, right? But I already know how to manage this, I think, right? The trick was to get in here, right? What they wanted to do was to block the entrance to this hotel, right? But they were short one car. They couldn't do it. I mean, if they had one more car in the queue, I couldn't do this, right? Which is, I think, what they wanted. Oh, and the guy is there, right? So the same guy, WMT 5173. That's the black Suburban, I think, or Tahoe. I can't recall what it is. He's in there again. All right. Yeah, so so they're doing the same thing, right? So this guy is gonna stop in that stop and he's gonna block me, like the same thing that they did the last time with that truck. You see? And they have this other car in here. But this one did it better. So he advanced to a point where I cannot cut him off as I did the last time. I see. Okay. Yes. But understanding how it works, it helps because I guess if I could help you, what I could do is say things that they may seem as dangerous, right? To be able to observe this switch, and then so the second tier comes in, and then he would be visible, right? To try to expose the second level, right? Because I think you want to get is the second level upwards, right? Like upper than that, like the second level or higher. Um, yeah, because otherwise it's a waste. It's a waste of time, right? So can I get in here? Can I not get in here? I don't know. Yes. Yeah. So that was that. That's so basically, the idea is that you don't have one triangle, you have multiple, and the ones that are next to me all the time are just their job is just to do triage, right? To understand severity and topic, and then they bring the right. They try to pinpoint it to the right level and then escalate from there. Like they don't start the work at the leaves in that situation, right? After there's the first escalate, after the triage, it doesn't necessarily go to the leaf. It depends on the severity, and then it escalates from there. Yes. So I had another thing, but let me. What I'm gonna do, because I'm editing this audio a lot. I mean, if the audio is too long, then I have to like cut segments and like silences and things. So let me. I'll close this part and then I'll start a new segment in a bit. Okay. So I made a mistake. I thought when I came here the last time, I thought that I'm at the FedEx, right? At the FedEx office. I thought I saw in the door that they open at 6 a.m. And I thought it made sense because it's next to the airport. But I came today and no, I was mistaken. It's at 9. So I came a bit early. So to to be efficient, let's drive. I guess this petition for writ of mandamus is not the petitions, from what I understand, right? I'm not a lawyer or anything, but from what I'm doing from what I learned through this experience is that these petitions are slow. So I'm not really expecting any relief from this petition. I'm just filing it to be compliant, because in the other instrument that I filed with, I think was so the motion to reconsider talks about this petition for writ of mandamus, right? So and now it's dismissed. It's not dismissed. It wasn't filed because it was rejected, right? Which is interesting, right? It makes that filing be not completely accurate, right? Because what I said was filed with the Supreme Court was not really filed because it rejected it, right? So I don't know. It's interesting that this situation was created. I cannot say that it was on purpose, but it's interesting, right? So I'm going to refile it for that reason. But I'm in no hurry. So we can do some work over here to see what's interesting, right? Yes. So let me Yeah, so I wanted to tell you, I was talking before trying to get into the FedEx office that about the infrared, right? And I said something like the remote controls of the TV that are infrared, say FCC, that comply with FCC regulations. But I don't know. I checked on Gemini just now, and it seems like the infrared spectrum is not regulated by anyone. Right? So what I said in the previous part is not accurate. That is not. But that said, it also, I also see that every device that operates on the radio frequency spectrum uh, is regulated by the FCC. So because these devices that they have mounted behind the windshield transmit and inspect the RF spectrum, they should be regulated, right? I mean, they should pass FCC regulations. They should be compliant. And I'm pretty sure they're not, because if the FCC knew what is in there, they wouldn't allow it, right? They would be banned. I mean, they're like a stingray device, right? So, I mean, they can probably be seized anyways, right? Just because of this, right? Because they're using this to intercept radio frequency. But the other thought that I had was about putting a light on that thing if it's recording, right? And if it's transmitting. So that could be interesting as well. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop this recording, this segment, and I'm going to start recording when I get to an interesting area. Okay. Bye. Hi, so this is another segment of demo D111, just to record something that I am observing on the traffic patterns on my way back home. I'm on the Beltway 8 in Houston. I'm on the exit of, I'll tell you the exit in a second, but what I'm saying is, now without getting into much details, but like after I dropped that package off at FedEx, something changed in the way they're behaving, right? And many things changed. And I've seen a few, what I would call emergency signals that they issue on the road, like, with visual markers. So I'm at West Road and Philippine Street, in that exit, on the Beltway 8, and I'm driving towards Lake Bonnet Estates, coming from the airport, basically. And I'm about 20 minutes out to Lake Bonnet Estates. No, 20 minutes out from I-10, I think. To I-10. No, to Lake Bonnet Estates. I can't recall. No, to I-10. Anyhow, yeah, so something changed drastically from 1 minute to the next. So I don't know, right? If I'm mentioning this because maybe is that they opened the package and they saw something in my filing that they didn't like, or that they saw risk in, and I don't know really what it could be, but it's the same petition, right? That was rejected. They already saw it. But maybe, right? Because if this is the case, I mean, it's too soon. I just dropped off the package 10 minutes ago, maybe 15 minutes ago. So it means that they are inspecting it inside the FedEx, right? I mean, if this is if this is the case, right? But I can tell you, like, the things change dramatically from 1 second to the next. So I don't know. Maybe they opened the package at FedEx and read it or scanned it, or I don't know. So I wanted to record that, and it's 9:41 a.m. on February 17th, 2026. And I dropped the package at around 9:20, maybe 9:30. Well, I have to look at the time in the receipt, right? But it's just a few minutes ago. Okay, I just shipped the package. The tracking number, I mean, this is a package of refiling the application for the petition of writ of mandamus with the Supreme Court. And it is 3988. I mean, the tracking number is FedEx 398809 344
243. I repeat, 398 809 344 243. The weight was I can't read this number, but the price was $210. Okay, I'll go back. Bye.